Hello there, welcome to Inkquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. I did a 4-pen unboxing of vintage pens a couple of weeks ago when I successfully purchased 4 vintage fountain pens off of eBay, all in one auction within minutes of each other. I was really stoked with those pens. This is the first one that I'm going to look at resurrecting today, and this is a 1949 Parker 51 Aerometric with a lustraloy cap and a colored finish called Cocoa. You either love or hate this color. I've heard some people call this color hot sick.
Like hot sick ass in a dead carcass.
Other people love it because it's close to that very rare color buckskin brown, but in any case, it's a lovely fountain pen, whether you like buckskin or hot sick. And I'm going to do a conversion on this Aerometric because I believe that these fountain pens need to be used. And the Aerometric filler, even though it was an advance when it came out in 1948 or 49, because it has a vinyl sac in it which lasts a long time, but the filling system isn't great by modern standards. I particularly do not like having to clean this pen out, squeezing it over and over again. This bar is sharp, that edge is sharp, and it's a real pain to keep clean, especially if you like to change inks. Modern pens, people would like a converter or a cartridge. And to accomplish that conversion with this vintage Aerometric, I use a brass converter that are turned by a young man in India, and I'll post his eBay sale right here so you can see it. And they're relatively inexpensive, about $10 US each. This replaces the Aerometric filler on this Aerometric and allows this pen to be used by a Parker converter or Parker cartridges, either short or long, making this a potential everyday carry fountain pen for modern fountain pen users. So this 1949 Parker 51 Aerometric is 79 years old, and it might last another 79 years, being used as a modern cartridge converter fountain pen. So let's start by triaging this pen to see what it requires for resurrection. It actually doesn't need to be resurrected so much because it is a Parker 51 Aerometric. These things last and last and last, and that vinyl sac in there just will last until doomsday. And you can see on the pen, it says, to fill, press ribbed bar firmly 6 times. Use dry writing super chrome ink, the Parker Pen Company, made in USA. There's a warning now, do not use Parker super chrome ink if you can find any, because it proved itself to be highly corrosive ink, and Parker stopped selling it. But that press firmly 6 times indicates this is an early Aerometric, and on the barrel we can see an imprint right there that says .9. That's the second quarter of 1949 right there, made in USA. And some of you may be wondering why there's a hole in the bottom finial, and that is to equalize the pressure. When you put this barrel back on again and screw it down tight, it can cause the sac to contract and expel ink out the other end. Now let's take a look at the top finial. The top finial jewel is in really nice shape. The chrome arrow clip. This is a throwback to the early 30s Parker Vacuumatic clip that was designed by Joseph Platt back in like 1931 or 32 and became part of the company's logo that still exists today. Very interesting. That's called lustraloy, that metal cap, and it is a sandblasted chrome, and it says Parker on the bottom of the cap. All that requires is a little bit of polish. There are no dents whatsoever and no deep scratches, just a lot of wear. So I'll buff that up on my buffing wheel, and let's take a look at the hooded section. There's a mark right there that looks like deep ink. You can probably sand that out, but no other deep scratches that I can see. Lots of wear, and of course that very faint imprint right there, we'll want to avoid that when we're polishing, but I can't see any deep scratches at all. So this is going to require a little bit of micromesh to polish that up. And we take the barrel off, and we're going to replace this part completely. These hoods were cemented on with some kind of an adhesive by Parker, similar to shellac, has the same melting temperature. So we'll heat that off, and the heat should allow this Sac Protector to come off as well. These early press 6 times Sac protectors were chromed steel, and they changed to aluminum after a couple of years and had press 4 times on those aluminum ones. But these steel ones were threaded on, and so you should be able to heat the adhesive off of those as well. So we'll get out our heat gun and a couple of pieces of rubber matting and give it some heat. And after a couple of minutes of heating, that hood has come free. You can take that off and take a look at our nib, which should be 14 karat gold. And we can take our clutch ring off. Later models of the Aerometric had an O-ring right there in advance of that clutch ring. When you're taking these apart, be careful you don't lose that O-ring. Add a little bit more heat here to those threads on the Sac Protector to get it to unscrew. And that softened up pretty quickly. Yeah, it's turning now. You can see that shellac adhesive right there. Some sort of adhesive. I'm not sure that it's shellac. But I know that these sacks, these vinyl sacks, were attached with something similar to nail polish. And that's something, if you're going to replace one of these vinyl sacks on a Parker Aerometric, they recommend that you put the new one on with clear nail varnish. But I don't need to do that. I'm just going to pull this one off. Need a little bit more heat. The Sac Protector is actually in really, really good shape for its age. Should be able to just peel that off. There. What we want to be careful is that we don't bend the breather tube that's inside there. It goes all the way down to about there. The early ones were made of silver and corroded quite easily. There we go. Just pull it from the end. So now let's see whether we can get this nib unit and feed out of here. There we go. Well, the nib came off. Let's take a look. What does it say? You can see it before I can. I can't see what it says. Okay, so let's close up on this. And no, you're not seeing double. My eyes are bad, but they're not this bad. That's a double strike. Look at that. It says Parker on the top, made in USA, in the second line, RU right there. RU what? RU 1949. The question that RU is asking is, are you gold? And yes, in fact, you are gold. This is 14 karat gold, but it's marked RU, meaning ruthenium, which is the tipping material on the end of that nib. So that is 14 karat gold. We'll polish that up. But I've never seen a double strike like that before. I thought first my eyes were going crossed.
He's my cousin.
And that's starting to give me a headache. Double vision, yeah. I'm seeing double. No, you're not wrong. You aren't seeing double. It's a double strike. And here is the feed. Pull it out the front. Yep. It's stuck in there. I'm going to put this in the pen flush bath of 90% distilled water and 10% ammonia in my ultrasonic bath, and let it vibrate out some of that old ink so that that feed will come out nicely. And we want to make sure we don't bend this silver breather tube, which is in surprisingly good shape. And here we go out of the bath. Pull on that. There's our ink collector. That'll go back in the bath for quite a bit because there's still a lot of old ink in there. And there's the feed and the breather tube. We're going to trim this off just about there. And we can polish up the bottom side, the visible side of that ebonite feed as well. But all three of these are going back in the bath for quite a bit to see how clean we can get that collector assembly. We're not going to be using this collar, so it doesn't need to go in the bath because this is going to go in here. And what I've found with these converters is that they're slightly small, and so I sand this down until it gets to the diameter that it can go inside that converter. We'll polish up the nib and the feed, and we'll put them back into the collector assembly somewhat like that, and then the whole thing goes in here, and we'll trim off the breather tube appropriately. But let's get this whole thing clean first. And there is our double strike 1949 14 karat gold Parker 51 Aerometric nib with the 1949 twice, the RU twice ruthenium, and put it on the end of a cotton swab like this so I can polish it easier. And it looks brand new. And here's the feed that I've polished up, and the ink collector all cleaned up as well, almost transparent. So now what I have to do is I have to sand this down to be able to fit inside this converter. Of course, we don't want this video to be boring, so I'll do that off camera. There, now I got the collector fitting inside the converter. Now we can go ahead with the conversion, and we have to trim off this breather tube, which I'll do with my Dremel tool, to a precise measurement from the end of the feed there until it is just below that piercing tube in the brass converter. I had to consult my previous video on doing this to figure out what measurement that is, because I never write stuff down.
There's also something called a liquor store. Write that down.
So now we're going to take our polished up nib and polished up feed, put them together. There's a couple of schools of thought about this. There's a wide channel right there on the collector and a narrow channel right there. And the consensus seems to be that the narrow channel goes to the wide part of the underside of the nib. So we're going to push that in as far as it will go. Check to make sure it is right down the center. And it is. Now the nib's lined up perfectly. And we're going to put the whole kit and caboodle right into the collector. And I'm going to use some gripper material on this to make sure it goes in all the way. There. It's very tight. Getting it out again is going to be interesting. Now I'm going to mark where the end of the brass hits that tube with my X-Acto blade. And you'll notice I'm supporting the breather tube as I do this because I've broken one before. This silver breather tube is very fragile. So I've made a mark right there, and we're going to pull the whole thing out again without breaking that tube. There we go. Now hopefully I can see the mark I made. There it is. I'm just going to mark it so my old eyes can see it. We're going to measure it in millimeters. Back from that mark, 11 millimeters. This is the old carpenter's adage. Measure with a micrometer, mark with chalk, cut with an axe. And I'll make another mark right there. And he failed to touch it. So we'll do that again. And we'll cut it with the Dremel right there. And that should make it just slightly below that piercing tube. There, now I've cut it off. And I've got a very tiny drill bit, and I made sure that that breather tube is open, but that might have some equalizing effect on the ink flow. I know that I've done this before, and the converted Aerometrics work perfectly with a cartridge or a converter. So let's put this converter back on again. Let's check the work. Yep, look at that. It's just 2 millimeters short of that piercing tube. And that, again, that tube pierces the cartridge when you push it in. And the whole key of a fountain pen is that it is a controlled leak. So you need to have ink flow and airflow the other way. And now we can assemble our pen, put the clutch ring on. So I keep my thumb pointed at the end of the top of the hood. And we see that the nib is off by about 90 degrees. So I'm just going to keep my thumb there. And we'll give this a 90-degree turn. Easier said than done. So I'm just guessing at this point. Let's just try it again. Yeah, I turned it way too far. So I need to turn it back by about 45 degrees. And it's almost there. That's as tight as I can get it. And it's off by half a millimeter. I'm going to need some assistance. Remember, I got to come back this way. Half a millimeter. I don't know whether I can do it. One little click. Let's see whether that did the trick. That click. And it did. Look at that. 4th time's the charm. There we go. But before we buff the whole thing up, I'm just going to test that nib. And we're going to perform a dip test on this nib. From the look of the tines, they are very nicely aligned, and it looks like it's going to be a medium, a fine to a medium. Let's see what we've got. 19, 40, 9, Parker 51, Aerometric, and I'd say this is a fine to medium. I'm just going to guess that this is probably 0.5 millimeters. Lay out some lines here for my pad from Dominant Industry and see what we have. Yeah, it's a bang on 0.5, which is a fine, a Western fine. And it is smooth with a lot of feedback. No line variation to be expected, of course. Let's check the wetness. And it's very dry. So I think one thing I might do is I'll put this on some micro mesh to polish out some of that feedback, because it's a little bit feedbacky. It's not scratchy at all. It just drags on the page. So I think it needs some smoothing. And it also needs some more ink flow. So I'm going to see about widening those tines a little bit to get some more ink flow out of this nib. Now I'm going to polish up the barrel and the hood with micro mesh from 1500 grit to 12,000 grit, and then finish off with some polish and my Dremel buffer wheel. And I avoid the imprint with the coarsest grades. And if I see any deeper scratches after 1500 grit, then I go after it with some 400 grit to get those scratches out, and then go back to the 1500 and go back on down the line after that. And here we are with a polished up barrel. That's all of the micro mesh from 1500 to 12,000 grit, and then some polishing compound, which I use Meguiar's Swirl Remover 2, and then I put it on my Dremel tool buffing wheel, and then I applied some conservator's wax to it. You guys may know this as Renaissance wax, same thing, sold here in Canada by Lee Valley. I put that on things that are acrylic or plastic, not on celluloid so much because it's not recommended for some reason. I think it reacts with the celluloid. But these Parker 51s were made of PMMA or lucite, so they're not celluloid. So we'll do the same thing with the hood, and we'll see how it looks complete. And there we have it, the Parker 51 converted to a cartridge converter pen, all polished up and looking brand new. I polished up the cap. I didn't put it on my buffer wheel because it tends to go uneven in the polishing, so I polished that by hand with a little metal polish and got all the old grime off it from many years. And the barrel is polished and the section hood is polished up. Unfortunately, I couldn't remove that one small occlusion. It's a lot less noticeable, but that's from someone dropping this pen and it's fractured inside the lucite, inside that PMMA, and ink got into that and stained it. No matter how much you sand that down, you won't get down to it. And I was able to widen those tines a little bit and make it a little bit wetter pen. I also smoothed it out with some micro mesh, and now it's a smooth writing, beautiful pen. I'll do another writing sample. I'm going to put a Parker cartridge filled with ink inside this pen, and we'll see how it writes. Now I've decided against the Parker cartridge. I'm going to use a PENBBS converter because they are exactly the same size as Parker converters, and I got a lot of them. So that should work to put some Watermans in this pen. There we go, it filled perfectly. And let's see how we're writing now. 1949 Parker 51 converted. It's a lot smoother than it was with less feedback. It's still a fine line, but we've got a little bit more ink flow. I'm going to try to widen it a little bit more as well, because more ink flow means it writes smoother as well. But that's writing very nicely right now. Beautiful pen. And I'll be back with my thoughts about this resurrection conversion. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? Well, I'm really pleased with this one. This one came out very, very nicely. The conversion went smoothly. No issues whatsoever with the breather tube. The pen was in really good shape to begin with. It didn't have any deep scratches in it. The only flaw in this pen right now is that occlusion in the lucite that absorbs ink. So it's a little mark that doesn't come out, but it doesn't leak, and the pen writes beautifully. The cap polished very nicely, and the pen takes a PENBBS converter. Very convenient. Now, the only issue I had with it writing was that it was rather dry. I polished up the nib a little bit to make it smoother, and it writes very smoothly now. But I spent some time separating those tines a little bit. I know you can't see it on close-up here, but I've got a space in there now, and this pen, it's been sitting out for a bit, this pen now writes with a much wetter line. You can probably tell the difference. Much wetter. And as I suspected, once it's wetter, it's even smoother. So a lovely, well-balanced, unique color Parker 51 converted Aerometric. You can use Parker small cartridges or Parker large cartridges, PENBBS converters, or even a genuine Parker converter in this pen. And if you're interested in purchasing this pen, I'm selling it for $130 US. Plus shipping. Send me an email at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address, and I'll get you a shipping quote. Shipping to the contiguous North America is about $10 US. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.